The twin suns of the planet Virelia painted the sky in gold and violet colors. The air shimmered above the silver trees that stood tall like giant crystal pillars. The wind moved gently through their branches, making a soft sound like distant bells. It was a world of beauty and perfection, a world that humans still found strange and wonderful. Ethan Cole, a human engineer from Earth, stood on the edge of a floating platform looking down at the glowing city below. The city of Valor Prime, capital of the Virelian Empire, was full of light and motion. Airships drifted between shining towers, and the ground below was covered with glowing lines that carried energy across the city. Ethan had been sent here as part of an intergalactic peace mission between Earth and the Virelian Empire. His duty was simple: repair a damaged communication array that connected both worlds. But nothing about Virelia felt simple to him. The Virelians were tall, graceful beings with pale skin that shimmered faintly under the sun. Their eyes glowed softly, and their voices carried a calm tone that always made Ethan feel slightly out of place. Humans were shorter, louder, and more emotional. On this planet of silence and order, Ethan felt like a spark in a room full of glass. Still, he loved his work. Machines made sense to him. They did what they were told, followed logic, and never judged. But people, especially aliens, were another story. That morning, Ethan was sent to the Royal Gardens to check a damaged power conduit connected to the palace's energy grid. It was a rare honor for a human to be allowed near the royal residence. Most of his team stayed behind, leaving him to work alone among the tall silver flowers and the humming energy vines. The gardens were quiet except for the soft hum of the machines under the ground. Ethan knelt beside a small console, tools spread neatly beside him. He opened the panel and began checking the lines. Everything was strange. Virelian tech was built from living crystal, not metal, and it responded to thought and touch rather than wires and circuits. He was so focused on his work that he didn't hear the footsteps behind him until a voice spoke. "You are the human engineer from Earth?" Ethan turned quickly. Standing a few steps away was a young woman dressed in light blue robes that shimmered like water. Her hair was silver white, falling down to her waist, and her eyes were bright violet, calm but full of curiosity. Even among the Virelians, her presence was graceful. "Yes," Ethan said, standing straight. "I'm Ethan Cole, ma'am. I was sent to repair the conduit. It's been causing fluctuations in the palace grid." She studied him for a moment, her head slightly tilted. "You speak with confidence for someone so far from home." Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Well, I try to sound confident. It doesn't always work." The woman's lips curved slightly into a faint smile. "You are honest. That is unusual here." He wasn't sure what she meant, but before he could ask, two guards appeared behind her, wearing armor that gleamed under the sunlight. They bowed slightly and said, "Your Highness, the council is waiting." Ethan froze. "Your Highness?" he repeated softly. The woman turned back to him with a calm nod. "I am Princess Cerilyn, daughter of Emperor Valor." Ethan's eyes widened. He quickly bowed, feeling embarrassed. "I'm so sorry, Your Highness. I didn't realize." Cerilyn lifted her hand gently. "Do not apologize. You are doing your work. Continue." The guards looked uneasy. They clearly didn't like a human standing so close to their princess, but Cerilyn's word was final. She waved them away and they stepped back, still watching closely. Ethan returned to his tools, trying not to show how nervous he felt. The princess, instead of leaving, sat gracefully on a nearby stone bench and began watching him. He worked carefully, explaining what he was doing to fill the silence. "The energy here flows in spiral patterns. It's different from human systems, but I think I can stabilize it by adding a feedback regulator." Cerilyn leaned slightly forward. "You understand our energy flows? Most humans cannot even see them." Ethan hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe because I don't try too hard. Sometimes machines talk if you just listen." Her expression softened. "That is a strange way to put it, yet I like it." For a moment their eyes met, human brown against alien violet. There was no fear or judgment in her gaze, only quiet curiosity. Suddenly the console sparked. A sharp burst of light shot out and a shockwave pushed Ethan backward. The energy vine beside him glowed bright red and overloading. "Get back," Ethan shouted. He grabbed a metal plate and ran forward, trying to block the sparks before they reached the princess. The explosion came like thunder, a burst of energy that lit up the garden. The blast threw dust and fragments into the air. When it cleared, Ethan was lying on the ground, his jacket smoking slightly, but the princess was safe behind him. The guards rushed forward with weapons drawn. "You dare endanger," one began, but Saralyn raised her hand sharply. "Stop." Her voice was calm but strong. She stepped closer to Ethan, who was slowly getting up, brushing off dust. "He saved me," she said firmly. If he had not moved, the energy burst would have struck me directly. The guards hesitated. Their eyes moved between her and the human, who stood silently, breathing hard but steady. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "It's okay, Your Highness. I didn't think. I just moved." Saralyn looked at him for a long moment. "Humans act without thought, yet sometimes that saves lives." She turned to her guards. "Take note of this man's name. He will continue his work here." The guards exchanged uncertain glances but obeyed. As they walked away, Saralyn turned back to Ethan. "You are injured?" "Just a little burned pride," he said with a grin. She gave a small melodic laugh, the first time he had heard her laugh. "Then perhaps your pride is too close to danger." Ethan chuckled, still amazed that she could joke after what happened. "I'll remember that." Saralyn's gaze wandered to the damaged console. "You said the energy flows in spirals. Can you show me?" He nodded and walked her through the process, using a scanner to display the energy lines in the air, glowing patterns twisting like gentle waves. She studied them carefully, asking thoughtful questions. For the next hour, they worked together, adjusting settings and recalibrating the power nodes. When the lights finally stabilized, Saralyn smiled with quiet satisfaction. "It is complete." Ethan looked at her, surprised by her interest. "You learn fast. Most people just let me do all the fixing." "I wish to understand," she replied simply. "Our empire depends on knowledge, but we have forgotten how to be curious. You remind me of that." For a while they stood in silence, watching the energy flow softly through the garden like ribbons of light. Then Saralyn said quietly, "You are different from what I expected. The others say humans are loud and impatient, yet you are calm, and your eyes see what others miss." Ethan wasn't sure what to say. "Maybe we're not all the same, Princess." "No," she agreed softly. "And that may be your strength." A light breeze passed through the garden, carrying the scent of silver flowers. For a brief moment, the alien princess and the human engineer stood side by side, watching the twin suns sink below the horizon. Saralyn finally turned to leave, her robe moving like water behind her. "Tomorrow you will come to the palace," she said. "There is more that needs repair, and I wish to learn." Ethan blinked. "You want to learn from me?" She looked back over her shoulder, a faint smile on her lips. "You listen to our machines. Perhaps it is time someone listened to you." With that, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone among the glowing vines, feeling like his whole world had quietly shifted. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but something inside him told him that this meeting was only the beginning. The next morning, soft sunlight fell through the tall glass windows of the royal palace. The walls shimmered with light from living crystals that pulsed like heartbeats. The palace was quiet, filled with calm music that flowed through the air like mist. Ethan Cole stood at the main gate, holding his tool bag tightly. His heart was beating faster than usual. It wasn't every day that a human was invited into the palace of Virelia. Guards in silver armor watched him carefully, their glowing eyes full of suspicion. They didn't trust humans even if he had saved their princess. One of the guards stepped forward. "State your name and purpose." "Ethan Cole," he said calmly. "Princess Saralyn asked me to come." The guard looked at a crystal tablet that displayed Saralyn's message, then nodded stiffly. "Follow me. Do not touch anything unless instructed." Ethan followed the guard through long corridors that glittered with floating lights. Everywhere he looked, he saw art and beauty. Walls made of clear stone, fountains that sang softly, and gardens growing inside glass domes. It was all too perfect, too clean. He felt small walking through it. Finally, the guard stopped before a wide door carved with symbols that glowed faintly. "The princess awaits inside." Ethan took a deep breath and stepped through. The room beyond was bright and peaceful. A round table made of blue crystal stood at the center, and beside it sat Princess Saralyn, reading something from a holographic screen. When she saw Ethan, she smiled softly. "You came," she said. "I was told it would be bad manners to refuse a princess," Ethan replied, trying to hide his nervousness. Saralyn laughed gently. It would also be unwise. Come, I want to show you something. She led him to a balcony overlooking the city. From here, Valor Prime looked endless. Towers floating in the air, ships gliding between them, rivers of light running through the streets. It's beautiful, Ethan whispered. It is, Saralyn said. But it is fragile. Our energy systems are failing in places. The old technology is too complex for most engineers now. She turned to him. That is why I need your help. You see things differently, Ethan nodded. I'll do what I can. Where should we start? Here, she said, handing him a small device shaped like a silver flower. It controls the palace defense grid. It has not worked for years. Ethan took the device carefully. This is old. Really old. You said your people forgot how to fix it? She nodded slowly. We depend on machines to repair other machines. But the original creators are gone. Only knowledge remains in fragments. Ethan smiled a little. Well, I like puzzles. For the next few hours, they worked together side by side. Saralyn asked questions, curious about everything. About human tools, about how humans learned through trial and error, and about why humans often smiled even when they were uncertain. Ethan explained as best he could, and she listened with quiet interest. At one point she asked, why do humans risk so much for others, even strangers? Ethan looked up from the device. Because sometimes helping someone reminds us what being human means. It's not about logic. It's about feeling. She thought for a moment, then said softly, that is a rare strength. My people would call it weakness. Maybe both can be true, he said. Sometimes feelings make us brave. Saralyn's eyes glowed faintly in the sunlight. Then I think I understand why you moved to protect me yesterday. Ethan smiled faintly. I didn't really think. I just acted. And that, she said, is what makes you different. As the day went on, they managed to restore the silver flower's function. When it lit up again, Saralyn clapped her hands softly, smiling with real joy. It works. The grid is alive again, Ethan grinned. Told you. Just needed a little human touch. Saralyn turned toward him, still smiling. Then perhaps the human touch is something our empire should value more. They both laughed. And for a brief moment, the difference between human and alien seemed to disappear. That afternoon, as they walked through the royal garden together, a small group of Saralyn's friends approached. They were noble women, tall and elegant, dressed in soft, glowing robes. Their eyes sparkled with curiosity. One of them, a golden-haired Virelian named Lariah, smiled teasingly. Saralyn, we have heard much about your human engineer. You spent quite a lot of time with him. Saralyn's lips curved slightly. He is skilled, and his company is interesting. The others giggled softly. Their eyes moved to Ethan, who looked uncomfortable but tried to smile politely. Lariah tilted her head. Interesting? That is not the word most would use for humans. They are too simple. Ethan chuckled lightly. Simple is another word for easy to understand. That's not always bad. The noblewomen looked surprised at his calm answer. Saralyn's expression grew warm with pride. Then Lariah said playfully, You protect him so fiercely, Saralyn. Tell us, who is this human to you? There was a pause. The sunlight reflected off the silver flowers and a soft breeze passed between them. Saralyn looked at her friends, then at Ethan, and then with a small mischievous smile she said, This is my husband. The words hung in the air like a sudden spark. Ethan's eyes went wide. The noblewomen gasped, their glowing eyes widening in shock. For a few seconds no one moved. Then Saralyn laughed softly. You should see your faces, she said gently. I was joking. Her friends laughed nervously, though they still looked unsure. Lariah smiled awkwardly. A strange joke, princess. Perhaps, Saralyn said calmly. But it seems humans bring out strange things in me. Ethan tried to laugh too, though his face was slightly red. That was a dangerous joke, Your Highness. Your guards might take it seriously. Saralyn turned to him, her violet eyes full of quiet humor. Would that be so bad? He blinked. For me, maybe a little. She smiled, the kind of smile that said she enjoyed confusing him. Then I shall make sure they do not arrest you for being my husband. As they continued walking, Ethan couldn't help but notice the curious stares following them from the palace windows. The rumor was already spreading like fire. Every servant and guard whispered as they passed. By evening, the story had reached almost every corner of the palace. The princess called the human her husband. Later that night, Ethan sat in the guest quarters staring out at the glowing skyline. He sighed softly. Great. Now the whole palace thinks I married the princess. He heard the door slide open behind him. Saralyn entered quietly, wearing a light robe. Her face carried a faint look of amusement. I heard you are the talk of the Empire already. Ethan gave a tired smile. You started it. Perhaps, she said gently, walking closer. But it seems to have made you famous. I didn't come here to be famous, he said. I came to fix things, and you have, she replied. You fixed the defense grid. You also fixed something else, he looked at her curiously. What do you mean? She looked out the window beside him. You made my people talk about humans differently. Before you came, they saw your kind as weak, emotional, and small-minded. But now they see something else. Someone who works hard, who risks himself to help others. You are changing how they think. Ethan was silent for a moment. I didn't mean to start anything. Sometimes change begins by accident, she said softly. But it is still change. They stood quietly, the stars shining over the city. Then Saralyn added, Tomorrow my father will meet you. The Emperor wishes to thank you for saving me. Ethan froze. The Emperor? As in your father? The ruler of everything? Yes, she said calmly. Do not be afraid. He respects courage, Ethan laughed nervously. That's easy for you to say. You're his daughter, Saralyn smiled. And you are the human he cannot stop hearing about. They both laughed quietly. For a moment, the palace felt less like a cage of rules and more like a place of friendship. As the night deepened, Saralyn looked at him with that same calm gaze she had in the garden. Ethan, she said softly, thank you for treating me not as a princess but as a person. He looked at her and smiled. Thank you for seeing me not as just a human. She nodded once, then turned toward the door. Rest now. Tomorrow will be a long day. As she left, the soft sound of her steps echoed down the hallway. Ethan looked out again at the twin moons of Virelia and whispered to himself, What did I just get myself into? He didn't know it yet, but the joke she made that day, the calling him her husband, would soon shake the entire empire. Morning came with a golden glow spreading across the royal palace. The twin suns rose slowly over the silver towers, and the city of Valor Prime shimmered like a sea of light. The peace of dawn felt almost unreal, yet for Ethan Cole, it was the calm before something greater, something he didn't understand yet. He stood before a tall mirror, trying to fix the collar of the formal robe they had given him. It was light blue with silver lines running across it, made of soft alien fabric that felt both warm and cold at the same time. He looked at his reflection and laughed quietly. I look like I borrowed someone else's clothes, he muttered. The door opened, and a guard stepped inside. The Emperor will see you now. Ethan took a deep breath. His hands were slightly sweaty, but his heart was steady. He had faced dangerous machines before, but meeting an alien ruler was a new kind of challenge. He followed the guard through the grand corridor until they reached the Hall of Harmony, a massive room filled with glowing pillars and a ceiling that reflected the stars even in daylight. At the far end sat Emperor Valor, Saralyn's father, a tall and dignified figure wearing robes of white and gold. His eyes shone like polished crystal, full of power and wisdom. Princess Saralyn stood beside him, graceful and calm as ever. Ethan stopped at the base of the steps and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, the Emperor's voice was deep but not harsh. You are the human who saved my daughter. Yes, sir, Ethan replied humbly, but it was mostly luck. The Emperor's lips moved slightly in something close to a smile. Luck is what the brave call their courage. He rose from his throne and walked slowly toward Ethan. You acted without hesitation to protect my blood. That alone speaks of character. Saralyn looked proud but quiet, her hands folded gently in front of her. The Emperor continued. However, there are rumors. The court speaks too loudly sometimes. Ethan felt his stomach twist. He had guessed this moment would come. Yes, Your Majesty. About what the princess said yesterday. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. Indeed. She told her friends you were her husband. Ethan tried to speak but stopped. How could he explain a joke to an alien emperor? It was just a misunderstanding, sir. A joke between friends, Saralyn interrupted softly. It was my words, father, not his. I did not mean it as disrespect. The Emperor studied her carefully. You have never joked like that before. I am learning from humans, she said with a gentle smile. For a moment, the Emperor's stern face softened. Perhaps too well. He turned to Ethan. Human, my people value honor and perception. What others see shapes what they believe. You must be careful. I understand, sir, Ethan said. I didn't mean to bring trouble. Sometimes trouble brings change, the Emperor said, looking thoughtful. Then he turned back toward his throne. You may continue your work with Saralyn, but know this, many in the court do not welcome you. Their eyes are sharp and their words are poison. Ethan bowed again. Thank you for your trust. Saralyn smiled faintly, her eyes showing quiet relief. After the meeting, Saralyn walked with Ethan through the palace gardens. The air was fresh and tiny glowing insects floated above the flowers. Yet Ethan noticed the stares of servants and guards following them wherever they went. Whispers filled the air like invisible birds. Do you hear them? He asked quietly. I do, she said calmly. They are afraid of what they do not understand. Ethan sighed. Maybe your father's right. I'm just a visitor here. I don't want to make things worse. Saralyn stopped and looked at him. You did not make things worse. You reminded my people that kindness can come from anywhere. Let them whisper. Truth often begins as rumor. Her words gave him strength. Still, something in the air felt uneasy, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Later that day, as they worked in the energy control room, Ethan noticed strange readings on his scanner. The planet's energy grid was unstable again, but this time the fluctuations were coming from deep below, near the planet's core. That's strange, he murmured, tapping the screen. The flow lines are pulsing irregularly. It's like something is draining energy from the heart of the planet. Saralyn leaned closer, her brow furrowed. That should be impossible. The core is protected by ancient shields. Then something's breaking them, Ethan said. If this continues, your entire power network could collapse. Before they could continue, an alarm sounded. Red light flooded the room and a voice echoed from the speakers. Warning. Core instability detected. Energy levels dropping. Saralyn turned to him, her eyes wide. You were right, Ethan grabbed his bag. We need to check the main conduits now. They ran through the corridors as guards shouted and systems flickered around them. The palace trembled slightly under their feet. When they reached the control chamber, Ethan's heart sank. Cracks of red light were spreading through the crystal walls. Something's eating the energy from the inside, he said quickly. It's like a parasite in the power lines. Saralyn looked alarmed. If the core fails, Virelia will lose its atmosphere. Millions could die. Ethan began typing rapidly on the console. We can stop it, but we need to shut down the main regulator manually. It's in the deep core chamber. That's below the city, Saralyn said. No one has gone there in centuries. Then we'll be the first, Ethan said firmly. The princess stared at him for a moment. You would risk your life for our world? He looked up, meeting her eyes. I already did once. Why stop now? For a moment, the air between them was silent, filled with something unspoken yet powerful. Then Saralyn nodded. Then we go together. They descended through long tunnels filled with glowing vines and ancient machines. The air grew hotter and heavier the deeper they went. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead, his scanner beeping faster. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. In the center floated a swirling sphere of red and gold energy, the planetary core. But black veins of light crawled across its surface like cracks. The parasite was alive, feeding on the planet's heart. Ethan stared in awe. It's beautiful. And deadly. Saralyn looked worried. Can you stop it? I think so, he said. But we'll need to reroute the shield power through a human-style stabilizer. It's risky. Risk does not frighten me, she said quietly. Good, he replied, smiling faintly, because this will take both of us. They worked side by side, their hands moving quickly over the controls. The floor shook and light flickered dangerously. Energy waves crashed against the walls like thunder. At one point, Saralyn stumbled as the ground shifted. Ethan caught her arm, steadying her. Their eyes met, close, tense, but full of trust. I told you I'd stay close, he said with a grin. You keep your word well, human, she replied softly. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, Ethan shouted, Now! Activate the shield! Saralyn pressed her hand to the crystal panel, focusing her energy. A bright white light surged from her palm, connecting with the core. Ethan added his own energy device, amplifying the signal. The chamber exploded in color, gold, blue, and silver light spreading across the room. The parasite screamed silently, its black lines burning away. Slowly, the core stabilized. The red glow softened into calm blue light. Ethan fell to one knee, breathing heavily. "We did it." Sarah-Lynn's voice was quiet, full of wonder. "You saved us again." He smiled weakly. "No, we saved us." She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You continue to surprise me, Ethan Cole." "And you?" he said with a tired grin. "Continue to make me nervous." She laughed softly, a sound like music in the storm. When they returned to the surface, the city was calm again. The people gathered in the streets, cheering as the power lights returned. The Emperor himself came to greet them. "You went to the core?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes," Sarah-Lynn said proudly. "Ethan found the problem. Together we stopped it." The Emperor looked at the human, then at his daughter. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke slowly. "Perhaps the stars themselves guided you here, human. You have done what no one else could." Ethan bowed. "I just did what was needed." The Emperor's expression softened. "And that is why my daughter trusts you." As the crowd cheered around them, Sarah-Lynn turned to Ethan, her violet eyes shining with gratitude. "You see, Ethan, you have changed everything. My people will remember this day." He looked at her with a small smile. "Let's just hope they forget the husband part." She laughed gently. "I would not be too sure about that." Above them, the twin suns glowed brighter, their light touching both human and alien alike. And in that moment, it felt like the first real bridge between two worlds had been built, not with metal or power, but with trust and courage. The sky of Virelia was clear again. The storms had finally ended, and the city of silver towers glowed under the two bright moons. Every street shimmered with peace after weeks of fear and confusion. People were celebrating the survival of their world, and in the heart of the capital stood the royal palace. Calm, proud, and shining once again. Ethan stood on the high balcony of the Royal Engineering Hall looking at the horizon. He felt tired but peaceful. The energy storm that had almost destroyed Virelia was gone. Together with Princess Sarah-Lynn, he had repaired the planet's core stabilizer, saving millions of lives. For the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt that maybe, just maybe, he truly belonged here. But deep inside, he was uncertain about his future. The Emperor had not called him yet. Some of the royal council still looked at him with cold eyes, and many nobles were still whispering about the rumor that Sarah-Lynn had started, calling him her husband. He smiled to himself. "That rumor will probably never die," he murmured softly. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Sarah-Lynn walked onto the balcony wearing her light silver cloak. The moonlight touched her gentle face as she smiled at him. "You're still awake," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Hard to sleep when your head is full of questions." Sarah-Lynn stood beside him, looking at the stars. "You wonder what will happen now," she guessed. He looked at her with a half-smile. "You always seem to read my mind," she smiled warmly. "Maybe because you think too loudly." They both laughed quietly. The air around them was calm, carrying the soft sound of the wind through the tall crystal trees below the palace. The next morning, the Emperor called for a great gathering in the royal hall. Thousands of Virelians attended, from nobles to engineers. The Emperor, tall and strong, stood at the center, wearing his golden armor. Sarah-Lynn stood beside him, graceful and calm, while Ethan waited at the side of the platform, unsure of what to expect. The Emperor raised his hand, and silence fell over the hall. "People of Virelia," he began in a deep voice, "our world faced destruction, and yet we stand here alive. That survival was not due to our strength alone. It was because of cooperation, between Virelian and human. Between my daughter Sarah-Lynn and a man named Ethan Cole." The crowd whispered, heads turning toward the human who looked surprised but respectful. The Emperor continued. "This man came from a distant world. Many thought humans were weak. Many believed they lacked discipline. Yet this man showed courage, loyalty, and intelligence. Without him, Virelia would have fallen." He turned to Ethan. "Ethan Cole, the people of Virelia owe you their lives. You are not just a guest anymore. From this day forward, you are a friend of the Empire and a citizen of this world." The crowd erupted into applause. Some even shouted Ethan's name. For the first time, Ethan felt warmth not from sunlight or machines, but from hearts. Sarah-Lynn smiled proudly. She looked at him with eyes full of quiet happiness. When the noise faded, the Emperor spoke again. My daughter Saralyn saw something in this human long before any of us did. She saw the courage of a protector, the mind of a builder, and the spirit of a leader. He looked at Saralyn and his tone softened. Perhaps that is what true wisdom is, and to see value where others see none. Ethan bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I only did what anyone would have done. The Emperor smiled faintly. Not everyone would have done what you did. You risked your life for those not of your kind. That is not duty. That is heart. The ceremony ended, but its meaning stayed in the minds of everyone. The human who once came as an outsider had become a hero, and the princess who once broke protocol had become the symbol of unity. Later that day, Ethan walked with Saralyn through the royal gardens. The crystal flowers glowed softly and the air carried the sweet scent of energy vines. It feels strange, Ethan said with a smile. I came here to fix machines and somehow I ended up saving a planet. Saralyn laughed lightly. You did more than save a planet. You changed how my people think. He looked thoughtful. Maybe. But I think it was you who really changed them. You had the courage to stand up for me. Saralyn's smile softened. Courage means nothing without someone worth standing for. Her words made Ethan pause. The light breeze played with her hair, and the moons painted her silver eyes with soft light. Saralyn, he said quietly, I never thanked you for staying with me when the core was unstable. You could have been hurt. She looked at him and shook her head. How could I leave? You were fighting for my world. It was only right that I fight beside you. For a long moment, they said nothing. The silence was calm, filled with unspoken understanding. That evening, Saralyn's friends came to visit the gardens. The same friends who had once teased her about the human. They bowed politely when they saw Ethan. One of them smiled and said, Princess, you were right. The human truly has a brave heart. Saralyn smiled back. I only said what I saw. Another friend looked at Ethan with a playful tone. So, Princess, is he still your husband? The question made Ethan freeze. The memory of that day came back to him, when Saralyn had told her friends he was her husband as a joke. Saralyn paused for a moment, then turned to them with a calm smile. Titles don't matter, she said softly, but he is someone I respect and trust more than anyone. Her friends nodded, understanding her deeper meaning. After they left, Ethan looked at her curiously. You didn't correct them, he said with a grin. Saralyn smiled slightly. Should I have? He laughed quietly. I guess not. The two stood together, watching the twin moons rise over the palace towers. Days passed and life on Verelia returned to normal. But for Ethan, nothing felt the same. He was now part of the royal science team, helping create new technology that blended human creativity with Verelian precision. His work helped improve energy systems, transport lines, and even the planetary shields. Whenever he passed through the city, children waved and called him the human hero. It made him smile every time, but even with all the respect he earned, what mattered most to him was his friendship with Saralyn. They spent evenings talking about stars, about Earth and its oceans, about Verelia and its endless skies. One night, as they stood again in the garden, Saralyn looked up at the stars and said quietly, One day I want to see your world. The blue sky, the seas, the people. Ethan smiled. And maybe one day Earth will see yours. Maybe our worlds won't just trade science and they'll share dreams. She nodded slowly. That would be beautiful. He looked at her with gentle respect. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were cold, distant. Saralyn laughed softly. I thought you were reckless, they both smiled. The stars above seemed to shine brighter, as if blessing the new bond between their species. When Ethan finally decided to visit Earth again for a short time, Saralyn came to see him off at the starport. The sky glowed gold with morning light. She handed him a small crystal pendant, glowing softly with blue light. This crystal, she said, is from the core you helped save. It will always remind you of Verelia and of me. Ethan took it gently. I'll treasure it, Saralyn smiled, her voice soft but steady. And when you return, I'll show you how much our world has changed. He nodded. I'll come back. That's a promise. As the ship lifted into the sky, Ethan looked through the glass window and saw her standing there. Tall, proud, and smiling. That same smile she had when she first said, This is my husband. It was not a joke anymore. It was a memory, a story, and a bond that would never fade. And as the stars stretched before him, Ethan whispered to himself, For humanity. For Virelia. For her. The engines glowed and the ship disappeared into the deep sky, leaving behind a world forever changed by one human's heart and one alien princess's courage.